This is Alexa Linton, and you're listening to the Whole Horse Podcast. I'm coming to you from the Cowichan Valley on beautiful Vancouver Island in Canada, and I'm excited to be bringing amazing instructors from around the world to share their knowledge about all the ways that we can keep ourselves and our horses well and happy, and about some of the cutting edge techniques, training, and different aspects that are coming into the horse industry and changing it from within. I'm so excited you're here, and I'm excited about the times that we live in and the shifts that are happening in the horse industry before our eyes. Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Whole Horse Podcast. This is Alexa Linton, and I'm very excited about my guest today because this is an area where I want to learn more and grow more. I have Jackson Holm, and he is a Natural Balance Dentist. So he's out in Alberta, and I was recommended to him by a friend of mine, and I'm really excited about this natural method of doing dentistry and learning more about how the teeth, equine teeth, and the balance of the jaw and the teeth helps horses feel better and be happier. So thank you so much for being here, Jackson. I'm really appreciative of your knowledge and for you coming on today.
No problem. I'm glad to have a little talk with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit more. I want to know kind of how did you come to this space of going, I want to do this with my life, and you know, what happened? What was the process?
I mean, I started off, I've always been around horses, and I think I wrote in my little blurb to you about my first word other than mom and dad was horse. So I've always had a love for horses and been around them. And then, so just through that, I've been around, interested in whatever it was, from jumping, cutting, anything I could. If there was a horse involved, I was around it. Took a little break throughout my late teens, early 20s, and then kind of moved back to the country and found myself driving around looking at horses. And then I told some of my friends that 6 months I'm going to have a horse, and they thought I was crazy because they just knew me from the city again. Mm-hmm. And it was maybe 2 months and I had another horse. And then since then it's just been that's all everyday obsession. So I've gone from that and really focused on horsemanship and was doing that, and moved into training horses, training for the public.
Yep.
Then I got into cutting, started colts, trained and showed some cutting horses. And so through all of this, there's always that performance aspect. And I was always looking at ways of like nutrition and body work or whatever there was. I'd have my horse's teeth done. Now, when I think back to it, not the way it probably should have been, but that's why we're having these talks. So we
absolutely
can have some education. And then, so I kind of always had this interest in it because there wasn't too many people doing it. And then started looking at schools, and there's a school down in Idaho. There's a few other schools around, and everybody kind of does power floats. And that's what everybody did around here. And then I found the school that I went to. It's Natural Balance Dentistry. Or the Center for, they just changed the website here. It's Center for Natural Balance Horse Dentistry.
Okay.
Run by Spencer LaFleur, and he's out on the East Coast in New York. And I just kind of got looking at his website, and they only do hand instruments, and it was the only website that really kind of mentioned horsemanship. So seeing that, I just looked at that and thought, for the amount of time I've put into my horsemanship, it just seemed like a good fit, and it was something different. I didn't know anybody that had done this style. I hadn't even seen it, and kind of just took a leap of faith and jumped in with both feet. And my first time down there, and the first day in class, I was like, it was perfect. It was the exact, perfect fit for me, and just, it was meant. It was supposed to be that way. So.
Fantastic. How long ago was that now?
Just coming up on 2 years here, right around.
Nice. That's excellent. And tell us a little bit more about that program. So how long is the program? I'm assuming there's lots of continuing education and,
With that program, if you go from start to finish, it's right around 2 years to get through certification. If you go to every class, there'll be a spring class and a fall class, and they're each 2 weeks. So I think now they've kind of changed the level since I started, but I think there's 6 or 7 levels before you can certify. And then after that, after you certify, you have to go back for continuing education every 2 years in order to maintain your status with the school. Yeah. And you get a little card. So if you're looking for a natural balance dentist, they always try, because we always have these cards utilizing, like show your card, or Perfect. Have people ask, because some people will phone and ask. I haven't had anybody phone me, but I know some people that they phone and they ask all the questions of, are you a current member holding the card? So that's vital too, because there are people that have gone through the school or have gone for a little bit, had a card or whatever, and will still say they're with the school or use the name, but aren't necessarily current and up to date on the certain, like the practices that we're doing now, because it has changed.
And I was going to say that it's probably consistently evolving as there's the learning takes place, and right, like I know we talked about this before the call. Dentistry is one of those areas that's still a little bit like behind the times in terms of equine dentistry, and like how much we know about the horse's teeth. You had sort of mentioned this sort of out of sight, out of mind kind of perspective that often happens with horse people, where we can't see in there, we can't really feel what's going on, and so we just kind of hope, I suppose, like fingers crossed, that what our veterinarians are doing for us is working right for our horses. And I know for personally that's not always the case, and I'm sure you have some opinions about that. So tell us a little bit about what you've noticed since you started this work. Like, what have you noticed in horses that sort of that's really kind of cemented, like, okay, this is a good path for me and this is really working?
Wow.
I know that's a big question.
You open up an open-ended question.
Yeah.
As far as, even just our approach, I think that's what I can sit here and talk, and what we'll say is it's different, and it's, people kind of get it. But then I know when people watch me work, there's a whole other thing, just because of the horsemanship aspect, that you can get done so much with these horses, like even unsedated, which people can't even believe. Even just horse handling, that's what gets most people when I go. They just kind of, if they don't really know me and what the style, and then show up and they watch me work, they're like, oh, like right from the bat, it's instantaneously, like I will open and close the spec. You get them used to it. You don't just go
totally
open the spec and just leave it open until you're done.
Yeah.
Open it. It's just horsemanship. That one, open it up, one click, close it. Open it up, 2 clicks, close it. Open it. And if they're having a problem with that when you're closing it, just give them some more time. And then most of the time they get pretty comfortable with everything you're doing. And then you get instant feedback. That's what I really like about you can do it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. I know, I've heard over the years, and as a body worker, for me, the hanging of the head under sedation always kind of got me for a few reasons. And I'm sure you have lots to share on this, but that sense of like, I don't think that jaw is now in alignment with that horse being, in that positioning. So share a little bit about that.
Well, even just, because with that, you can just imagine when we work, you kind of want them to hold their head in a natural position. It's just, I think, better for them, a little more comfortable. And you're not, probably when they're hanging their head from the rafters and you got your mouth gapped way open, I think that causes probably a little bit undue pressure on your TMJ. And probably if you're under real heavy sedation, with a little bit of pain relief in there, I could see maybe subluxating on that, or going too far.
Yeah.
Because it is when you're feeling good and just have your jaw hanging way open. So
absolutely. And under sedation, those muscles would be quite lax and hypermobile.
And not to say that there isn't a time for sedation, and there isn't. It just depends on horses and situations. If you can get it done unsedated, it's great. Not always going to happen. Because I know there are some trains of thought, like I've seen, even just talking about dentistry, where other schools are great at bashing other schools.
Oh, I'm sure. I think that's the case in most things.
You can't do it without sedation. You can't do it without spec. You can't do it, like, just different ways. And
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what we're really working with here, I called it the whole horse podcast because I was like, how do we look at the whole horse? So,
Mhm.
in my mind, like I said to Jackson before the call, I was like, don't worry about getting complex. It's good to like, challenge our thought processes and like build our understanding. So,
Mhm.
one of the words that Jackson just uses, like TMJ, and not everybody may know, but it's called the temporomandibular joint. So it's the joint between the mandible bone in our horses and the temporal bone on the side of the head. And it's quite a complex little joint. Hey, like there's lots going on in there in terms of the muscles and the ligaments and the little
Very,
disc and,
very dynamic joint, the way it moves up, down,
absolutely.
right, left, forward, back.
Yeah. Well, in horses, and amazingly for us, I mean, as humans, we mainly have like, open close and a little bit of deduction. I don't
Yeah.
have very much. I realized that this class. But, in terms of our horses, I mean, they have this incredible, hopefully, range of motion within that joint, right? Because of
Yes.
their grazing and things. Is that accurate? This is kind of the first time I've thought about that.
Oh yeah, no, and it's not necessarily just the aspect for the whole body, for the whole horse, with through like the trigeminal nerve coming through, and all those nerves are going to the teeth, really. So if
Mm-hmm.
you have, kind of think of it like as an electrical, you can have like maybe a short out if that mouth isn't perfectly balanced. You can have something with more pressure, and that will short that circuit out. So you will see a lot of, I've seen it, it's cool little neurological resets when you get something back in balance in the mouth, and they'll do a little, their eyes will flutter, or they'll yawn or whatever, they'll shake their head kind of.
Yep.
It's the first time I saw it in my first class, we just took two pulls off an incisor, and the horse did this thing with his face and his eyes rolled, and I didn't know what happened. I was like, oh, what do we do? What do we do? And they're just like, no, it's just a reset. But
Yep.
it's just cool to see. And you see it on quite a few horses. That's part of it too. Like you do a little bit of work and take a step back, go wash off your instrument in the bucket. You just kind of give them that time, and they
Mm.
start feeling it. It's amazing what that feedback you get, and the instantaneous, like you do it right then, and lots of times it's right away. That's really cool.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. Yeah. And so, that sense of working with the whole structure, right? It's like you're looking at, uh, you know, um, okay, these nerves go through these bones, these little tiny holes in these bones, and they need the spaciousness to be able to work properly. How do we create that? So when you're looking at a mouth, Jackson, like this is so fascinating for me. When you're looking at the mouth, do you kind of come to it, have a look, like see the
Yeah,
balance, do a few things,
yeah,
leave,
I
kind
can
of come
kind of
back?
say what some things that people can even just at home just
Yeah.
kind of go and check for. I mean, I think I've watched some of your webinars or whatever. Someone did a talk on TMJ.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
was like, oh,
Brienne.
great. She just did half my spiel of, of what exactly I was
That was
talking
an
about.
excellent talk. Yeah,
It was very good. I liked it, but it was nice to hear that other people talking about it, not just dentists. Like there was
absolutely.
the awareness of the head and how everything's connected. I really liked that. But so first, when I would come up to a horse, would be the first place I usually check would be their temporal muscles. You'll see, and if
Yep.
you get one versus the other, if you have one bigger than the other, usually we have that just right away. That's off the bat. There's
Yep.
usually an imbalance in the mouth because the temporal is more for compression versus lateral movement.
Yep.
The masseters are more for lateral movement. So you might have a big temporal on one side and the masseter might be a little bit smaller.
Right.
So with that bigger temporal, usually that means the inclination in that mouth on that side is a little flatter,
Okay. Yeah,
which
and just so for people in our, because we're on video here, everybody, but you're going to hear the audio, so we just want to make sure that we're pointing at these different places. But
yes.
so the temporal muscle, if you can kind of give us a sense of where that is for people to look at.
Trying to think how to describe this.
Yeah,
I guess
I
down
know.
on their forehead, on the edge below their ears, kind of. That would be probably the best.
Perfect. Yeah. So most people will know it as, that the muscle like almost under kind of the ear,
Yeah, it's all
right?
actually there are muscles that go through there connected through the ears and
Yeah. So, and it's a very interesting thing because I notice, as a body worker, you start to like really look, and there's some horses where you're like, oh, that muscle's like really bulging, um, whereas other horses, it's, and I think part of that's probably breed or conformation, but then part of that may be other things. I've met several horses that have actually kind of shared with me that they get headaches and, they have a lot of pressure regulation issues within the cranium. So there's that as well, right? And then with the masseter muscles, we're looking in the cheek, the muscle in the cheek. Yeah. So great. So people can kind of have a look and go, are those even?
Just move the forelock to the side, or your horse has a nice flowing forelock, move it over and have a little look, palpate a little, if you can feel, because sometimes necessarily you won't be able to see it, but if you feel it, one side will feel a little harder than the other.
Yep.
And means that side's working more than the other. Or even just watch your horse chew if he's chewing just one way lots of times too.
Okay, great. What would be some other things for people to have a look for if, in terms of whether their horse might be a little bit out of balance or not feeling great in their mouth?
The easiest thing to do is flip up their lip and look at their incisors. Most people don't even do that. I know when I've done some other talks, when I go home, lift up their lip and just see. You'll be able to see. It's pretty easy to see if there's a big problem going on.
So what would you see in the mouth?
It depends on if you had a broken tooth there, or you can kind of tell pretty quick of a decent balance. Everything's pretty straight and there's no gaps and broken teeth or waves, like up and down, jagged edges.
Yep.
It's pretty quick. If there's a big problem, just that quick initial look. And you can look kind of on the side if there's little hooks on the upper.
Yep.
There'll be possibly little hooks there. Just a quick look, like a quick glance there.
Absolutely.
Because that would be.
Yeah, and I'm sure you could also see alignment stuff, there, where it's like if you're looking at the front teeth and they're like way off, or over under bites and different things like that. I know I have the mare next door. I actually meant to ask you this because she's like lost a lot of the enamel on those front teeth. There's breaks and things. She gets all this hay and stuff caught within these spaces that she has now, and but she's very interesting because her bite is quite, her lower jaw is quite narrow as compared to her upper jaw. And
warm blood.
Yep.
Tell
me about that.
That one I think is more just because warm bloods have kind of come from mixing a bunch of different breeds, so there can be some mismatched parts. So in that, maybe you have like more of like a draft maxilla versus like a more thoroughbred mandible.
That's amazing because she's of course a Percheron thoroughbred cross, right? So so she's got like an upper jaw of a Percheron and a lower jaw of a thoroughbred in a way, hey?
Yep, that's possible. And then that's going to change the angulation of their teeth and probably what they're going to be. Just
totally.
But that's another thing too that we do is you're looking at this horse and you're looking at to balance this horse to that individual, not just a stock. This is what we're doing because humans love straight lines and smooth and just. So you look at that. I was going to say another thing after the temporal. You can even go down and check. There's facial crests on your horse. It's kind of hard to describe.
Well, if people can see the video, we're going to put this up.
Or look up where your facial crest is on your horse, and you can kind of put your thumbs on them, and if they kind of line up, and you don't have one higher than the other, or just you can eyeball it pretty quick. Because I come across that quite a bit, where the horse structurally, their skull is set on a kilter. So when you see that, lots of times then you would go and maybe if you look at your horse's incisors and they say there's a slant on them, they have a big wedge, look at that and take notice of it. But you have to also look at other parts of that horse to notice, is this structural for this individual?
Yeah.
Because if you go through there, I just actually the other day came across this where I looked at a horse. He was a little bit he was 17 or something, and just kind of checked him out and lifted up his lip, and he had a big wedge. And they told me about, oh, well, the previous dentist had gone through and made it straight, and it was 2 years since they had it, and that wedge was back. And I said, and I did look a little bit harder, because sometimes you don't necessarily see it right off the bat, but then just at the end of his maxilla, his nose, he had a slight twist on the one side, which would skew his the incisors to the side. And that wedge coming back after 2 years kind of is an indication that that's what that horse wants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because she said they've had it, they make it straight. That wedge comes back straight. That wedge, every year you're fighting that wedge. I'm like, that wedge keeps coming back.
He needs it.
Yeah.
He needs it.
He needs it to perform, really.
Yeah.
Because their TMJ, everything is now set up that way. Because I know even Spencer had a story. He was working on, I think, these fancy jumping horses down in Palm Springs or in California somewhere. And he went and kind of worked on this one horse, and he told the lady, get on. Or I think it was before, no. Looked at it, and this horse had a wedge, so he left it, bounced the horse the way he thought it was. The people came back, looked at the horse, and flipped open the lip and saw it, and then were mad because they'd spent so much money on getting rid of this wedge, and he just left it.
Yeah.
And so we just told him, get back on your horse, get on, just ride quick, and then go up and see what happens. And the lady jumped that horse right away, and then got off and said she was on the phone, and he thought he was in trouble, but then she was on the phone. I don't know if either giving other people trouble or lining up. I think it was more lining up more horses.
Yeah, totally.
That had all these experts come through and look, and never decided that structure was it. That's my dog trying to get her food right.
Mine haven't barked yet. Yeah, and really, I mean, it sounds very similar, because I've done, quite a bit of work with like hoof work, natural hoof trimming as well. And it's that sense of like, if they keep growing bars over and those bars just keep popping out, like, don't take them from them, don't take that soul. It's like they need that to actually do the other things. And with osteopathy, one of the things we learn is like, you don't want to take the compensations until they're ready to let them go, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe it's like you're working on a horse with a wedge, and then someone comes in and does body work and actually is able to shift that maxilla position, or open that up, and then the body goes, okay, now this is uncomfortable, I don't need it anymore, and then maybe you go in and actually handle it at that point.
Yes, because I've come across that. I don't know how to move the facial bones and all that, but I know it can be done.
Yeah.
So yes, from my perspective, I see some structure, and that's what I've got to work with. But now I do know that you can move some of those bones and change things, because that's a lot of it too. Like when you're looking, I'll look at eyes. If there is a wedge, you're looking at their eyes, you're looking at nostrils, you're looking through that whole head to see if there is something, there's an imbalance of why that should be there.
Absolutely. And when you're training, how far back do you go? Like, what do you look basically at the head only, or are you looking into the cervical spine? Or are you looking further back? Like, we'll
check. So we'll go from there, and then we'll also be checking the atlas ramus. So that's how to explain that one. Just kind of check spacing there. And you also check underneath their jaw, their ganache, and then you can kind of check the hyoid under there. And then also just checking range of motion on their neck.
Yep.
You'll notice
so like side bending, rotation.
It might get tougher one way versus, or even up and down too.
Yep.
They'll get stuck and they won't be comfortable holding their head lower. And then from there too, you also look at, because the mouth is imbalanced, lots of times you can look back into the body, and you'll start seeing different areas which would be caused from the mouth.
Absolutely.
So it's more like, I know, like I'm just looking at my one textbook right here. It's like advanced whole horse dentistry, because we're looking at.
I want that textbook, by the way. Have to go online. Sounds amazing.
I don't think you can buy it.
Right on.
Maybe find one for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sorry, totally interrupted with my excitement, but that sense of like looking at the whole body, because I'm assuming that once you kind of go through and balance the mouth, you're going to see differences in range of motion, and how the spaciousness in different places, the balance of the hyoid.
Yeah, posture on lots of them changes right away.
Yeah, I bet.
Just even recently, I've had quite a few where I get talking about it, and then I'm just explaining and not really looking at the horse, explaining kind of what can happen. And then the owner will be like, yeah, like that. And their horse will be standing perfectly square. And I'm like, exactly like that. So,
Very
like, right
cool.
on. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah. So on that note, let's talk a little bit about performance. So, what are the differences that you notice when a horse is well balanced in the teeth? I mean, so often it's funny in our culture, we have this like idea that, we're looking, say at the teeth and the mouth, that's where we stay. It's kind of contained in that space. But, I love this idea that, okay, like this impacts and is connected to all these other things. So like, do you have a good story that way where it's like something really miraculous shifted from working with the mouth? Not just from, but you know what I mean?
I mean, there's lots of, I think it affects most of the horses really, because when we get through, I guess I'll maybe touch a little bit on inclination, because that kind of really will affect a lot of this. Because a lot of the times traditional dentistry goes through and they just are looking to take down the sharp points, which in a lot of time ends up being they flatten the angle on the tooth versus leaving the inclination. There's supposed to be some inclination on that tooth, and lots of times it'll be on the uppers, it'll be on the outside, the inclination coming down, that will get taken down because that's a sharp point.
Got it.
And then along the tongue, the same kind of thing, that inclination goes up towards the tongue, so that will get, so then both upper and lowers get flattened out, I guess you could say, or inverted, the angle. If you ever can look at a skull or a tooth, you can kind of see that there's supposed to be a little bit of an angle to it. So like through the kind of dentistry, and there's other people that I'm sure do it too, but you have to leave that inclination in there for to get proper occlusion on those teeth, and then that allows neurology, so the nerves to go through to everyone with the body, which greatly affects performance. Just that keeping the inclination in there. So a lot of that would be, or the big one that we found that you really take notice of would be at the very back of the mouth. If it's very flat, we call them palatal rims. Take those and add some inclination back to that. And that usually relates to the opposite hindquarter. A lot of that. So, and that's when you have two things that I've found, pretty much every horse that has an imbalance in their temporal muscles, usually if they have one that is bigger than the other, it is connected
to the opposite
left hind or whatever right hind, because I'll back them up lots of times. That's also what I'll do in my kind of pre-check, move their body around a little bit and just see if something's out of place or if they're struggling with something, just to check.
Perfect.
Because you never know, you can always connect something to whatever. But definitely the temporal and backing them up, they seem to back away from that because that leg isn't as strong, so they're not pulling. So.
Wow. Yeah, for sure. And I mean, osteopathically speaking, that is the situation as well, where the cranium has huge impact, obviously throughout the spinal cord, and on the dura mater and the health of the spinal cord itself and the neurology there and the power that's able to kind of get back there. But also, just, through those reciprocal kind of structures, right? TMJ back into sacroiliac joint or into the hip joint, very, very connected on the opposite side. So it's great that you're, that's kind of something that's brought in through that and that's shifted. I remember my teacher often talking about this idea of this not wanting someone to, really like do a lot of work on the grinding surfaces. Is that what you're talking about with that inclination piece of, when somebody goes in and sort of power floats in the grinding surfaces, that would really change, especially if they're looking for a flat surface.
Yeah, I mean, we want to leave texture there.
Yep.
You go through and you return that inclination. I wish we could show a tooth right now, but it doesn't matter. But we can do that another time. There's if you look at a tooth, there's little folds above it, and we call those enamel folds. And that is all that I will adjust. Because if you adjust just that, you'll leave texture on there, and it'll be almost like a sandpaper.
Yep.
A lot of times when you go and just flatten them out, you go into the body of the tooth.
Yep.
And that changes the texture and really quite a bit, and it damages the tooth a little bit too,
Yep,
and takes away inclination. So.
And what does that sandpaper texture do? Is that for kind of grinding their forage and that sort of thing? Is there?
Yeah, and it helps get proper eruption through their teeth and everything. Because when you take that away and you don't have any, when they're flattened, the eruption rate slows down and the teeth aren't erupting the way they should, and then that's when you start getting weird imbalances and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you notice it. I'll notice it pretty much. If the people don't tell me, I can tell just by once I start working on the horse, just the way my blade grabs on them, it changes the way the tooth feels. It's really, really glassy, and even the little bit that I get off, like the tooth that I get off, it's different. It feels different.
Yep.
Better to work with, but I'll notice it right away. And it can take. I looked at a horse just this summer that had been power floated, and it was 2 years plus, and those teeth were still like glass. Yeah. So actually, here's something that people can do though too, if they think their horse has been over power floated, or if that's the case, you can use vibrational therapy, because when they have that little bit of texture in their teeth, that creates the vibration, which stimulates the growth of the tooth. So if you've had a horse that has been over power floated and feels like glass or whatever, just take some clippers and place it on the jaw.
Oh.
Or put them in a trailer. Spencer loves to say that too. Put them in a horse trailer, go drive around. And but I think we've kind of tried to decide on a lot of performance horses and whatever, rodeo horses, whatever you want to say, that we know they're getting power floated, and we know they're getting inclination drop down lots of times, not always. How they're performing or getting these teeth back, and we kind of think just they jump in the trailer and they're driven everywhere. So that little bit of vibration does help. It helps stimulate the growth of the teeth, kind of get it back.
That's funny. Yeah.
So if you took that and took your clippers and put it on their jaw for, I don't know what it is, 5 minutes or something, for 30 sessions. It doesn't have to be 30 days in a row. Just that, whenever you can get out and do it, then that should help stimulate growth to where I would have something to work with. Because you all come look at some and there's nothing. You've got to wait. It's just got to be time for new tooth to erupt.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing to take away. Yeah, for sure. That's cool. I've never heard of that. It's a great tip. And I'm assuming, the sense of like, if someone's had a horse that's been over power floated, and that most recent power float was like 3 or 4 months before that, there may not be a lot that you can do, or there's probably still stuff that you can go in and work with.
Well, most of the time, because a lot of people don't touch incisors, so that's usually
right.
If they go through an overfloat on the molars, then there's always, for sure, if they haven't touched the incisors, there's always incisor work to do, and that helps. You can usually do something right away with that.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Kind of sets it up.
Well, tell me a little bit about incisor work, because I don't know a lot about that, and I'd love to get a bit more of a sense of what you're actually looking for, what you're doing.
Okay. Well, I mean, the incisors, if you look, I guess it's kind of when a horse, I'll just start with an example of, people always think horses as they get older, they get long in the tooth.
Yeah.
When really you want those horses, the length and angle of those teeth should always be the same from 5 until death.
Yep.
Because just that's the proper, they're maintained that way, the proper angles, all that relates back to the TMJ and a balanced TMJ. And once it's all kind of set up that way, it all just kind of self-maintains. If you have uneven wear, or if you're only doing molars and not touching the incisors, you're leaving a gap on those molars a little bit. And I think that is why there's commonality of, you'll get those horses that get really splayed out and those teeth start.
Yeah, because they start to come like way out front almost as they get older, right? Like there's that sense of like the angle even changes.
Yeah, angle changes huge. So then you'll get, your TMJ will compromise.
Yep.
causing problems throughout the body just from that.
Well, and I can
So,
imagine it would be painful to have that kind of like stretch on the, do you know what I mean? Like on those teeth, like that would be like, there would be nervous system stuff, and there's a lot of muscles in there that would be fatiguing, and, you know, like much less like the bone structures. So
yeah,
yeah.
and then that'll wear out those teeth faster too, and you'll
Yeah.
lose neurology to those teeth, which
Yeah.
there's so many nerves going through to the incisors. So I guess really for that, we want to try and maintain that balance angle from roughly when they're 5, right around there.
Yep.
And we kind of want to look and try and improve lateral movement. And then you also have your AP, forward and backward movement. So it's
I
just
like that
more.
you say AP.
I say that last and then I realize that maybe don't realize what I'm saying.
So yeah. This is geeking out anatomy language for anterior, posterior, everybody. Yeah. Perfect. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's the main balance is what we want. When you look at a nice balance, it's for that individual, as long as the structure isn't
the
ledge or whatever, it should be fairly straight across and moved smoothly side to side and forward and back.
Yeah.
Same thing as what you want that TMJ to do.
Yeah. Absolutely. And do you actually go in and check those, like induce those movements then, Jackson? Is that a part of kind of what you're working with?
Yeah, once we start working, when you do a little bit, you'll do work in one spot and you just kind of check continually as you go. And you don't want to get to a point where you're gapping those incisors, because you need that occlusion for those nerves to kind of fire, for all the neurology to be still there. If you make big gaps, then it's hard for that horse. I mean, sometimes if they lose a tooth or whatever, they're growing in, they've popped the cap off. And it's actually, that's one of the interesting things about with younger horses, where if you're riding a younger horse and all of a sudden it kind of feels like they don't know where their feet are, is because they could have had a cap pop off somewhere.
Oh.
And that proprioception, those nerves, that neurology isn't firing back. Because I've rode plenty of young horses where just out of the blue, they find that they feel like they've lost their feet. They don't know where they're going.
Interesting. Yeah.
So then it's kind of, it's because I've talked with, I know even with show horses, about some people, it seems like they get really solid when they're 5, and they have a full mouth when they're 5.
Yep. Yeah.
So I think mentally, physically, everything at 5 is better for the horse.
Yep.
So it kind of all made sense once I got into this, even just from showing horses, younger horses, and training them, why all of a sudden you would be riding and be going great, and then all of a sudden, for no reason, kind of lose it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I kind of, want to get into a little bit more on here is the idea of when we would actually be like really starting our horses and, getting going with them, riding in the bridle, things like that. And I'm sure you have your own opinions on that, but that makes a lot of sense in terms of everybody's safety, right? It's that sense of that, I know with Diva, like I didn't really she's really had a retirement her entire life, to be perfectly honest, but I didn't really fully start doing a lot with her until she was about 5. And then at that point, it's like her body was, she's a draft cross. So it was actually maybe a little bit later, but that sense of like, okay, I feel really like solid and safe with her, and she knows where her feet are, and, she has a sense of things. So.
Yeah, no, that makes, once I learned all this, it made complete sense.
Has it shifted your, kind of thinking around when you should start a horse, or like,
a little bit.
Yeah,
I have a 4-year-old sitting in the pasture that hasn't been started.
I totally love that. That's so great.
I would never do that. So.
And I bet people going, why haven't you started that horse? What's wrong with it?
No, part of me even still dies a little bit when I think that she's 4 and I haven't started her. She's happy.
But you're gonna have like a horse that's super solid and well built and like.
Yes, exactly, and that's kind of what I've wanted to do. Yeah. I mean, I have shown cutting horses, and we go through, but then you're starting them so early, and then it depends on the horse. They get really good care, and but some of them don't last. Where for me, when I don't have my millions of dollars yet, that now those horses I would like, even if I don't get to show them when they're younger, we can stretch this out, and I'm going to have a horse into their teens or later. Yeah. Still being functional.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And
So that's a whole other topic.
it's a whole other topic, maybe another time. Yeah, because I know I was like, being a body worker, it's so fascinating to work on those horses that, the one Western pleasure horse that was started at, like loping circles at 1.5, right? And it's just as he's done. He's 11 and gorgeous horse, but like
Mm-hmm.
the joints have tapped out, right? So I can see that with happening in the mouth as well. So it's kind of it's definitely like I think a touchy subject within the horse industry, but one I think that's very worthwhile exploring.
Yeah, I mean, I would say if people are riding their horses, like starting them at 2, if you're going to be riding your horse, I would probably recommend have somebody look in their mouth.
Yep. Perfect.
It makes
how early? Like how early would you recommend? Like,
I mean, if they're riding them at 2,
get in there.
Check in there. But the thing with that is the sutures on the skull are a little
fused yet. Yeah.
So you have to be really careful with that, and a lot of the work, like put a speck in their mouth and leave it open for a big amount of time is it can cause some problems. So on a lot of 2-year-olds, you have to try and go in there if you want to do it and not be worried about those sutures in the skull and causing problems.
Yep.
You got to be efficient enough to be able to do it without that speck. I know there are people that do it with. So, but that is just one thing that we recognize too, that at 2, you got to be careful. Those bones are still pretty soft in the skull, and
absolutely
damage.
Yeah.
So usually wait until 3 when they're a little bit. But if you're riding the horse at 2, I recommend trying
getting in there. Yeah. And tell me, okay, so another controversial issue, bits. So, by majority people ride in bits. I know I ride in a Bozell, but most people. So, do you have a favorite bit? Do you have recommendations about bits? Like as far as fitting, like what it's like a Pandora's box, but
not so much. I wouldn't say I have a favorite bit because I don't know if there's one bit that's going to be good, or I don't really have what's one horse's favorite bit versus another. It changes really. And I think a lot of people, because actually that'll bring up a topic which is really good, is bit seats. Because a lot of times you'll get people that have to put in, or you have to say they have to put in a bit seat.
Okay, so what is that? Give me I don't even know what that is. So
it will be the first molars.
Yeah.
They'll go and kind of round the edges off of them and make a little seat, which we don't do in the school that I go to, because in utero, the horses are in occlusion on that 6, 7, and 8. Those molars, they're in occlusion. So that creates the stability for the proper functioning TMJ.
Yeah.
So when you go through and take away, some of the bit seats can get quite aggressive, and you're taking away maybe 33%, or I'm not sure, there might be much of that, of the occlusion on that tooth, on those 6s there. So it just, creates a little bit of a problem.
Totally.
But supposedly, a lot of times, I'll say too, if your bit is back there and you're hitting teeth, then you need to probably be looking at other things you're doing other than just bit seats.
How are you riding right now?
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. Any recommendations around, fit? I've seen some people where it's like literally like there's like all these wrinkles at the side of the mouth, and I'm like, I think that your bit is a little tight, like.
Yeah. I mean, wherever that horse kind of wants to pack it, if they're tossing their head around and you're making contact, there's probably a good chance that either you're smacking teeth or the horse needs to see a dentist.
Absolutely. And I know, unfortunately, well, I'm going to say unfortunately, a lot, there's horses out there that can wear just so much pressure, right, in terms of that stuff. There are like caretaker horses that just go, whatever, I have a terrible fitting saddle and this bit is so painful, but I'm just going to kind of do my thing. I sometimes call them the robots. But what, like for the non-robot horses, what would you see like for a horse where, you know, that bit wasn't working for them, there was pain in the teeth, like there was pain at the TMJ, you know, what are kind of some typical behaviors and things that that owner would notice about their horses?
I would say probably a lot would be head tossing, or
Yeah.
even sour to put the bit in.
Yeah.
If you want to put that in and they start getting sour on it, that would be first and foremost, would be right in your face kind of thing. People don't really notice that sometimes, or think it's a training issue and go to training on their horse. Really, maybe your bit is, or something's going on in the mouth. That's where instantly I would probably be looking if it's.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So those are sort of the more obvious ones. Now, in terms of like more subtle performance issues, like, I mean, you were doing a lot of training and working with cutting horses. Like, what did you see, you know, before and after kind of thing in your performance horses? I'm assuming that, you know, their bending was better and all these things, but, you know, what were the things you noticed?
I mean, biggest thing I've noticed, because with cutting horses, you kind of, when they stop, you want to keep them nice and straight and strong. And a lot of that, and backing up, you do lots of backing up with a cutting horse.
Yeah.
So with this, once their mouth is properly balanced, I noticed just they can back straight.
Right.
Go in and back straight, and you're not holding, because we get to be magicians with our legs, like holding this horse's body into a position and getting back straight. And then next thing you know, this horse goes over there, hits, stops, goes back up, and it's just straight.
Yeah.
I do that on a lot of horses once I'm done working on them. If I back them up, it's just kind of in my pre-check.
Yeah.
It's easy to see, and lots of people will see that horse. You might be backing up at an angle and a little bit slower, and then some of them that when I do it after, they'll just take it right then, take a huge step back and just pull right straight back. And
yeah.
That's what I've noticed, just for me, because we do so much backing up.
And you think of all the movements for a backup, right? You're usually needing, you know, flexion at the pole, and, you know, like then there is like pressure at the TMJ, probably through the bit motion, and like there's a lot going on. Much less like, you know, the nuchal ligament being released, and then like cervical spine actually being, you know, reasonably in line. But yeah, I can imagine there's so much mouth stuff that would be impactful there.
The backup is kind of a good one to show, because I feel like if a horse is compensating somewhere, that backup is going to show it really with their neck or whatever, back legs, if they're compromising this position. And it's easy to show too, and you usually see that right away.
Absolutely. And
even too, you'll notice horses, maybe if they get throwing their head, they're not turning from their nose, turning properly. Like if you have pain on that TMJ, they'll kind of get throwing shoulders, or
rotate their head to try to do it.
And I'm getting really big on watching a lot of reining horses. When they come in, you'll see this big stop, and then right away, as soon as they stop, I'm looking to see which way they're backing up. If they're backing up and they're usually at an angle, then I'm watching that hind leg. Once they go into the spin, because I've noticed they'll spin the one way, and they'll be framed up pretty good and look all right. And then they go to spin the other way, and then they'll still do it, kind of like how you said when you said robots. Instantly, I thought of
reining horses.
But then the horse, they'll just compensate. And this actual one horse I watched the video of, he was really nice in a good frame, spinning to the right, I think. And then once he went to go to the left, still spun hard. Yeah. But his head position had moved. I could see he was balancing himself differently just from that. So I was
absolutely
just seeing the relation now, like putting it together in their body and through the mouth into the body, and seeing the performance issues.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes so much sense. And I mean, you know, especially, you know, even in, I'm obviously a little more natural / lazy in all of this, but, you know, even for that sense of like, I'm still looking for, you know, I have a mare with a very long back. Like I want her to be working in a reasonable amount of collection, so she's actually using her back. But I do know, like, you know, if those teeth are off, then that's really hard. That's horse with the neighbors. It's like, I look at her and I'm like, oh, you need your teeth done, girl. 'Cause she cannot bring her nose back. Mm-hmm. She just can't flex at the pole in that way. And so she's constantly bringing her shoulder. She's like a, wants to travel straight all the time. She can't kind of get that shoulder up and under her and go into a nice bend. Yeah. And it makes me really curious about, what is going on there? So I'm going to have to just watch her a little bit more.
Yeah. And then also in that too, like how I said, you check that atlas ramus. That would, if you feel that if she's really super tight there, some horses, they just can't physically hit that collection the way they want to, or the way we want them to.
Yeah,
they end up breaking differently in their neck or through their body differently, which I think most people, if they're going to ride dressage or anything like that, need to be checking that atlas ramus to see if the spacing is there for that horse to actually be able to do its job.
Totally, because otherwise they're going to be compensating all over the place to try to get there. Yeah. Wow, super fascinating. Thank you so much for this. I feel like we could keep going and going.
I've got lots of stuff to go.
I know. We definitely will come back. I know that we'll everybody out there, me and Jackson will put our heads together and get some cool topics together to kind of dive more deeply into, because there's so much here. And I know for so many of us horse people, we want to do right by our horses, but we don't always know what to do and how to do that. And so it's so excellent to have someone like you here, Jackson, to kind of give us that, some of the, it probably seems so simple to you now that you've learned it, but if you remember back, it's like when you started, you're like, oh my God, mind blown about some of these pieces.
Oh yeah. No, even my first day at school, that's always our biggest thing, is your mind just gets blown and you don't say anything for about 3 days. You're just sitting there wondering what you've got yourself involved in. And if I will ever understand any of it. And then slowly it starts, once you get out to the horses, kind of, for me, getting your hands on, then it starts making a little bit more sense.
That's awesome. Yeah. And I'm sure it's, that perspective as well, if we apply that more holistic perspective and a more balanced perspective to, you've probably now applied it in different areas with your horses. So it's kind of cool how things ripple out, in terms of creating the healthiest possible situation for them. So
yeah, and it takes a team.
Yeah.
Get the feet right, get the teeth right.
Yep.
The body, because it'll all affect each other. Because I might be able to fix something in the body or in the teeth that'll fix the body, but then there also might be something in the body that's going to affect the teeth, and I'm never going to get it without. So that's what I like to advocate too, is just teamwork, and not be so much have vets versus lay people versus this. It just everybody wanting to work to better the horse, really.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. And it's really kind of how I do things as well. Hello, Riley. Massive nose. Hi. Is if we can all work together, the goal is a healthy, happy horse, right? It's so what's it going to take to get there? And, at the end of the day, it takes a team, right? I know for myself, I'm constantly referring out okay, this horse needs this or that. It's that sense of really collaborating to be helpful. So glad you're on that page.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
awesome.
A good way to be. And
it
horses
is.
are a lot happier too.
Yeah, and that's what we want, for sure. Yeah. Well, Jackson, we're gonna call it a day so that everybody, it's an easy amount of time to digest this information. But as I say, we'll be back, everybody, with Jackson Holm. Jackson, if you can share, is there any way to kind of get in touch with you? Do you have a website or an email or?
Probably the easiest way, I'm on Facebook, Jackson Holm. That's easy to find. And then I also have a closed group on Facebook. It's JH Equine. And I will add people on through there. Or I just set up a different email account here. It's jhequine00@gmail.com. Somebody else went and stole JH Equine on me. So.
Damn it. Yeah. Okay. So jhequine00@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Excellent. We will be back. Thank you so much, Jackson.